The world's most feared criminal died with a smile on his face. Not because he had escaped. Not because he had won. But because even as the life drained from his body, he believed he would find a way back. The police called him a monster. The media called him the Shadow King. Governments across the world spent 20 years trying to catch him. And only one man finally succeeded. Detective Daniel Hayes. The bullet that ended Victor Blackwell's life came from Daniel's gun. As Victor lay on the floor of an abandoned warehouse, blood spreading beneath him, he stared directly at the detective. "You think this is over?" Victor laughed weakly. Daniel kept his weapon aimed. "It is." Victor smiled. "We'll see." Then everything went dark. Victor Blackwell died. Or at least, everyone thought he did. 3 months later, Victor heard voices. Soft voices. Strange voices. His head felt heavy. His body felt wrong. For some reason he couldn't move. He tried opening his eyes. Bright light flooded his vision. The first thing he saw was a hospital ceiling. The second thing he saw was a nurse. The third thing he saw made absolutely no sense. A tiny hand. His tiny hand. Victor stared at it. His brain stopped working. For almost 30 seconds, he simply looked at the tiny fingers moving in front of his face. Then reality hit him. Hard. What the? Only a strange baby sound came out. What? Victor froze. No. No, 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 no. He tried speaking again. I demand an explanation. Why, yeah. The nurse smiled. Oh, he's awake. Victor's eyes widened. Awake. Awake. Why was she talking to him like that? He tried sitting up. Nothing happened. His neck flopped backward. The nurse laughed. Victor wanted to scream. Something was very wrong. An hour later, the truth became impossible to ignore. He was a baby. An actual baby. A tiny useless baby. Victor Blackwell. The greatest criminal mastermind in history. The man who controlled international syndicates. The man who manipulated politicians and billionaires. The man feared by governments. Was now wearing a diaper. A diaper. Victor wanted to die again. Unfortunately, things were about to get much worse. The hospital room door opened. A woman entered first. Beautiful. Smiling. Exhausted. She looked directly at him. Oh, there's my little boy. Victor stared. Who was she? Before he could think further, another person entered. A man. Tall. Broad shoulders. Sharp eyes. The moment Victor saw him, every memory came rushing back. The warehouse. The gun. The bullet. The detective. Daniel Hayes. The man who killed him. Victor nearly had a heart attack. You. Daniel stopped walking. His expression froze. Victor froze. The room froze. For a brief second nobody moved. Then Daniel slowly looked around. Confused. Emma noticed. Honey. Daniel blinked. Did you hear something? Emma frowned. Hear what? Victor stared at him. No way. Daniel's eyes widened. No way. Victor suddenly realized something. Daniel wasn't hearing sounds. Daniel was hearing his thoughts. This is bad. Daniel immediately went pale. He can't hear me. Daniel nearly dropped the flowers he was carrying. Emma looked even more confused. Honey, are you okay? Yeah. No, you're not. I'm fine. You look like you've seen a ghost. Daniel slowly looked toward the baby. Victor slowly looked toward Daniel. Both knew. Neither spoke. Emma smiled. Would you like to hold your son? Daniel looked horrified. Victor looked horrified. Neither wanted that. Unfortunately, Emma didn't care. Seconds later, Victor found himself in Daniel's arms. The detective stared down. Victor stared up. This is awkward. Daniel almost dropped him. Okay, stay calm, maybe this is a coincidence. Victor smirked internally. Detective, I know exactly what you're thinking. Daniel's face twitched. And yes, it's me. Daniel nearly choked. Surprised. Daniel walked straight out of the room. 1 hour later. Daniel sat alone in the hospital cafeteria. Coffee in hand. Staring into space. His brain was broken. Completely broken. His newborn son was the criminal he killed. And somehow he could hear every thought in the baby's head. There was absolutely no logical explanation. Daniel was a detective. He believed in evidence. Facts. Reason. Not reincarnation. Not mind reading. Not whatever nightmare this was. Yet every piece of evidence pointed toward one conclusion. Victor Blackwell was back. And he was living in Daniel's house. Daniel buried his face in his hands. This can't be happening. At that exact moment, Victor was in the hospital room making discoveries of his own. Interesting. The nurse smiled. Oh wait. My body may be weak. The nurse smiled wider. But my intelligence remains intact. The nurse pinched his cheek. Victor wanted revenge. First objective, escape. The nurse laughed. Second objective, rebuild my empire. The nurse took a picture. Third objective, destroy Daniel Hayes. The flash went off. Victor blinked. Fourth objective, find whoever invented diapers. His expression darkened. And make them suffer. The ride home. 3 days later, the Hayes family finally returned home. Victor spent the entire car ride planning. Every great criminal organization needed resources. Money. Influence. Connections. Power. He would start small. Then rebuild. Step by step. Nobody would suspect a baby. It was perfect. A flawless plan. The moment they arrived home, Emma placed him in a crib. Victor immediately attempted his first escape. He rolled left. Nothing. He rolled right. Nothing. He tried standing. Instant failure. His legs folded like noodles. Victor fell face first into a pillow. Curse this body. Across the room, Daniel heard everything. He smiled for the first time all week. Laugh while you can, detective. Daniel smiled wider. One day I will return to power. Daniel sat down beside the crib. Victor narrowed his eyes. Daniel narrowed his eyes. A silent battle began. I'm going to escape. No, you're not. Victor froze. Daniel froze. Emma froze. What? Emma asked. Daniel immediately panicked. Nothing. Victor stared. You can answer me directly. Daniel stared back. Apparently. Victor's eyes widened. This changed everything. Emma looked between them. Why are you both staring at each other like that? Neither answered. Because for the first time since Victor's death, the detective and the criminal understood something. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a dream. This was real. And they were stuck together. For years. Maybe decades. A detective forced to raise the world's most dangerous criminal. And a criminal forced to call the detective who killed him. Dad. Victor Blackwell had survived gang wars. He had escaped federal raids. He had outsmarted intelligence agencies from multiple countries. He had once disappeared from a prison that was considered impossible to escape. Yet now, he was trapped inside a wooden crib. And there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. The worst part wasn't even being a baby. The worst part was Daniel Hayes. The detective somehow heard every thought that passed through Victor's mind. Victor still couldn't understand how it worked. Every plan he created was immediately exposed. Every scheme was discovered before it even began. Every evil thought was basically being broadcast directly into the detective's brain. It was humiliating. Victor stared at the ceiling of his nursery. He had spent 3 days analyzing the room. The window was too high. The door was always closed. The crib walls were too tall. His body was too weak. There was only one solution. An escape operation. A great criminal never accepted defeat. Even if that criminal currently weighed less than 10 kilograms. Victor slowly rolled onto his stomach. The movement alone exhausted him. This body was pathetic. He gritted his tiny baby teeth. Then he began moving toward the edge of the crib. Centimeter by centimeter. Slowly. Carefully. Patiently. A true mastermind never rushed. 20 minutes later, he had traveled almost half the crib. Victor felt proud. This was progress. Then the nursery door opened. Daniel walked in carrying a cup of coffee. The detective looked at Victor. Victor looked at the detective. Without saying a word, Daniel reached into the crib and placed Victor back in the center. Then he walked away. Victor almost exploded from frustration. The entire operation had been ruined in 2 seconds. Daniel didn't even look impressed. The detective simply took a sip of coffee and sat in a nearby chair. Victor glared at him. Daniel smiled. For the next hour they stared at each other. It became their daily routine. A silent war between detective and criminal. Father and son. Hero and villain. Unfortunately for Victor, the hero was winning. By a lot. A week later, Victor discovered something interesting. The Hayes family owned a dog. A large golden retriever named Max. The moment Victor saw the animal, an idea formed. Every criminal empire needed loyal followers. This dog would become his first subordinate. Max approached the crib. His tail wagged happily. Victor extended one tiny finger. The dog sniffed it. Good. Trust was being established. Victor nodded seriously. The dog licked his face. Victor almost fell over. Still, the first step of recruitment had begun. Over the next few days, Victor spent every available moment building a relationship with Max. The dog followed him everywhere. Well, as much as a dog could follow a baby. Whenever Emma carried Victor around the house, Max walked beside them. Whenever Victor cried, Max appeared. Whenever Victor laughed, Max wagged his tail. Perfect. Absolute loyalty. Just what a criminal mastermind needed. Finally, Victor was ready. One evening, Max sat beside the crib. Victor looked directly into the dog's eyes. This is it, he thought. Tonight we begin our rise to power. Max tilted his head. Victor continued. Your first mission is simple, get me out of this crib. Max stared. Victor stared back. Max barked. Victor took that as agreement. The operation had begun. Several minutes later, Max grabbed a stuffed teddy bear and dropped it into the crib. Victor blinked. That wasn't helpful. Max barked proudly. Victor sighed. Perhaps training would take longer than expected. Across the room, Daniel watched everything. The detective couldn't stop laughing. Victor hated him. A month passed. Victor continued searching for opportunities. Eventually, he discovered something new. Bobbies were underestimated. Adults assumed they understood nothing. Which meant adults spoke freely around him. One afternoon, Daniel was talking on the phone. Victor listened carefully. A detective's conversations could contain valuable information. Information was power. Power was everything. Victor concentrated. Daniel discussed a robbery investigation. Then a suspect. Then evidence. Victor memorized every detail. His criminal instincts immediately activated. Interesting. Very interesting. Even as a baby, information could be useful. Perhaps he didn't need physical strength. Perhaps intelligence alone would be enough. A smile appeared on his face. Daniel noticed instantly. The detective immediately stopped talking. Victor's smile disappeared. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Victor narrowed his eyes. The Cold War continued. One morning, Emma entered the nursery carrying a colorful toy. Victor hated colorful toys. He was a former criminal kingpin. Not a toddler. Emma placed the toy in front of him. Victor ignored it. Emma smiled. Victor continued ignoring it. 5 minutes later he was playing with the toy. It made funny sounds. In his defense, the sounds were surprisingly entertaining. Nobody needed to know. Especially Daniel. Unfortunately, Daniel walked in. Victor immediately pushed the toy away. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Victor looked innocent. Daniel laughed. Victor wanted to throw something at him. But his arms were too short. Life was unfair. Another week passed. Then something unexpected happened. Victor successfully crawled for the first time. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't fast. But it worked. For the first time since his rebirth, he had mobility. Real mobility. The possibilities were endless. Victor immediately launched escape plan number 2. The mission was simple. Reach the hallway. Reach the front door. Reach freedom. Victor crawled out of sight. Past the living room. Past the kitchen. Past Max. The dog happily followed him. Everything was going perfectly. Victor could almost taste victory. Then he reached the front door. Freedom was only a few meters away. His heart raced. After months of captivity, he was finally escaping. Slowly he approached the door. Closer. 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 Then a shadow appeared. Victor froze. Daniel stood directly in front of him, holding a cup of coffee. The detective looked down. Victor looked up. Neither moved. After several seconds, Daniel sighed. Then he picked Victor up. Just like that. The great escape was over. Victor felt his soul leave his body. Back in the nursery, Daniel placed him inside the crib. Victor lay there dramatically. Defeated. Broken. Humiliated. Daniel sat nearby. For once, neither of them seemed interested in winning. After a while, Daniel spoke quietly. You know, if you spent half this effort on being a normal kid, life would be easier. Victor stared at him. Daniel stared back. For a brief moment, neither was detective nor criminal. Just two people trapped in a ridiculous situation. Then Victor suddenly yawned. His eyes became heavy. No. Not now. He wasn't tired. He refused to sleep. A criminal mastermind didn't need naps. Another yawn escaped. His eyelids drooped. Daniel smirked. Victor fought with everything he had. 5 seconds later he was asleep. Daniel laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. As Victor slept peacefully in his crib, neither of them noticed a man sitting inside a black car parked across the street. The man lowered a pair of binoculars. His expression was serious. Very serious. For months he had searched for signs. For proof. For anything. And today, he had finally found a lead. The man pulled out an old photograph. A photograph of Victor Blackwell. Then he looked toward the Hayes house. A smile slowly appeared on his face. Boss, he whispered. I think I found you. Victor woke up to the familiar sight of the nursery ceiling. For a few seconds he forgot where he was. Then reality returned. He was still a baby. Still trapped. Still living in the house of the detective who had killed him. Victor sighed. At least sleeping helped pass the time. Unfortunately, another problem had appeared. Someone was watching the house. The previous evening, Victor had noticed a black car parked across the street. At first he thought nothing of it. But then the same car appeared again. And again. And again. That was not a coincidence. Victor knew surveillance when he saw it. After all, he had spent years avoiding it. The person inside the vehicle was being careful. Very careful. But not careful enough. Someone was investigating the Hayes family. The question was why. Before Victor could think further, the nursery door opened. Emma entered with a smile. Good morning. Victor immediately put on his best innocent baby face. It wasn't difficult. He literally had the face of a baby. Emma picked him up. You slept well. Victor allowed himself to be carried downstairs. There wasn't much choice. His current transportation options were limited. As they entered the kitchen, Daniel sat at the table reading the morning newspaper. The detective looked tired. Very tired. Victor immediately became suspicious. Daniel looked like a man who hadn't slept much. That usually meant something had happened. The detective glanced at Victor. Then something surprising happened. Daniel's expression suddenly became serious. Very serious. Victor recognized that look. It was the look Daniel made whenever he noticed danger. Interesting. Maybe Daniel had seen the black car too. For the rest of breakfast, neither spoke. Not that Victor could speak properly anyway. But the silent tension was obvious. Emma noticed it immediately. What's wrong with both of you? Daniel shook his head. Nothing. Emma sighed. You've been saying that for days. I'm just busy. Victor almost laughed. Daniel was a terrible liar. Emma eventually left for another room. The moment she disappeared, Daniel looked directly at Victor. Victor stared back. For several seconds neither moved. Then Daniel quietly said, "Someone's watching the house." Victor nearly choked. So Daniel had noticed. Of course he had. The man was one of the best detectives in the country. Missing something like that would have been embarrassing. Daniel leaned back in his chair. I don't know who they are yet. Victor remained silent. His mind raced. There were countless possibilities. A journalist. A criminal. An investigator. Or someone from his old organization. The possibility sent a chill through him. His empire had been enormous. Even after his death, many loyal followers remained. If one of them discovered he was alive, things could become complicated very quickly. Daniel suddenly narrowed his eyes. Apparently he had heard that thought. Great. Now the detective looked even more concerned. The two continued staring at each other. Then Max the dog entered the kitchen carrying a sock. The tension immediately disappeared. Max proudly dropped the sock at Victor's feet. Victor looked at the sock. The dog looked proud. Victor looked confused. Daniel laughed. Victor hated this house. Across town, a man sat inside a parked vehicle. His name was Lucas Reed. Years ago, he had been Victor Blackwell's most trusted lieutenant. His right-hand man. His closest ally. After Victor's death, everything had fallen apart. The organization had fractured. Leaders fought among themselves. Operations collapsed. The empire slowly crumbled. But Lucas never stopped believing. Victor Blackwell was not the kind of man who simply disappeared. There had to be something more. And now, after months of searching, Lucas had found the impossible. A baby. A strange baby. A baby connected to Daniel Hayes. At first the theory sounded ridiculous. Insane. Impossible. Yet every clue pointed in the same direction. Lucas opened a folder filled with notes. Inside were photographs. Dates. Observations. Patterns. Everything. One picture showed Victor staring directly at Daniel. Another showed Daniel staring back. The expressions were identical. Suspicious. Far too suspicious. Lucas smiled. Boss. He whispered. If that's really you, I'll find out. Meanwhile, Victor spent the next few days observing. The black car continued appearing. Sometimes in the morning. Sometimes at night. Always watching. Always waiting. Whoever was inside was patient. Victor respected that. Patience was an important quality. Unfortunately, it also made them dangerous. One evening, Daniel stood near the living room window. Victor sat nearby on the floor. The detective looked outside. Victor followed his gaze. The black car was there again. Daniel immediately grabbed his jacket. Victor became curious. The detective headed for the front door. Interesting. Very interesting. Daniel was finally making a move. A few seconds later, the front door closed. Victor crawled toward the window. Outside, Daniel crossed the street. The black car remained parked. Closer. 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 Then suddenly, the vehicle started moving. Its tires squealed. The car accelerated away. Daniel stopped running. Too late. The driver escaped. Victor frowned. Whoever was watching knew what they were doing. This wasn't an amateur. This was someone experienced. Someone trained. Someone dangerous. Daniel returned home several minutes later. His expression was darker than before. Victor knew exactly what that meant. The detective had learned nothing. That night Victor couldn't sleep. For the first time since his rebirth, he felt genuinely uneasy. The world had started moving again. People were asking questions. People were investigating. And eventually, someone would discover the truth. The question was what would happen after that. Would his former followers try to bring him back? Would his enemies try to kill him? Would Daniel finally lose his mind? There were too many unknowns. Victor hated unknowns. As he stared into the darkness, another thought appeared. A dangerous thought. What if some part of his old empire still existed? What if loyal followers were waiting for his return? The possibility was tempting. Very tempting. Then another thought appeared. A memory. Emma smiling at him. Max wagging his tail. The strange family dinners. The peaceful house. For a moment Victor felt something unexpected. Conflict. He quickly pushed the feeling away. He was Victor Blackwell. The Shadow King. One of the most feared criminals in history. He wasn't supposed to enjoy family life. That would be ridiculous. Still, the thought refused to disappear. Elsewhere in the city, Lucas Reed finally received a phone call. The voice on the other end was nervous. I found something. Lucas sat upright. What? The Hayes family. What about them? There was a break-in attempt tonight. Lucas froze. A break-in. That wasn't part of his operation. Someone else was interested in the Hayes family. Someone else had discovered something. The realization sent a chill through him. This was becoming bigger than expected. Much bigger. Lucas slowly stood. His eyes hardened. Find out who it is. The man on the phone hesitated. And if they find him first? Lucas looked toward the city lights. His expression became cold. Then we have a problem. Back at the Hayes house, Daniel quietly checked every door and window before going to bed. His instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Someone was watching. Someone had attempted to enter the property. And somehow, he had a feeling the answers were connected to the baby sleeping upstairs. The same baby who happened to be the criminal he had killed. Daniel rubbed his forehead. His life had become absurd. But absurd or not, he intended to protect his family. No matter what. Even if that family included the world's most dangerous former criminal. Victor Blackwell had faced many enemies during his life. Rival crime bosses. Government agencies. Elite military units. Assassins. Detectives. Hackers. Traitors. Yet none of them compared to the horror he was about to face. A babysitter. It started on a Saturday morning. Daniel had work. Emma needed to attend an important meeting. Neither could stay home. Victor was happily sitting in his playpen when he heard Emma speaking on the phone. Thank you so much for helping. Victor didn't think much of it. Then the doorbell rang. A young woman entered the house. She was cheerful, energetic, and smiling far too much. Hello. Emma smiled. Perfect timing. Victor suddenly felt nervous. Very nervous. Something about this situation seemed dangerous. The woman walked over and crouched in front of him. Awa, look at him. Victor immediately looked away. The woman laughed. He's adorable. Victor had once controlled a criminal empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Being called adorable felt insulting. Unfortunately, things only got worse. His name is Damien. Emma nodded. The woman smiled. Well, Damien, we're going to have lots of fun today. Victor didn't like the sound of that. Not one bit. An hour later, Daniel and Emma left. The front door closed. Silence filled the house. The babysitter turned toward Victor. Victor turned toward the babysitter. For several seconds, they stared at each other. Then she smiled. Let's play. Victor immediately knew this was going to be terrible. He was right. The next 3 hours became the most exhausting battle of his life. The babysitter wanted to sing songs. Victor hated songs. The babysitter wanted to dance. Victor hated dancing. The babysitter wanted to stack colorful blocks. Victor hated colorful blocks. Everything was awful. At one point she placed a toy crown on his head. Awa, little king. Victor nearly died from humiliation. If any of his former subordinates saw this, he would never recover. Meanwhile, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the attempted break-in. The detective sat in his office reviewing security footage. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. The person who approached the Hayes house had been professional. They knew how to avoid cameras. They knew how to avoid attention. This wasn't random. Someone was investigating his family. And Daniel had no idea why. Well, almost no idea. His gaze drifted toward a photograph of Damien. The baby stared back innocently. Daniel sighed. Nothing about his life made sense anymore. Back at the house, Victor finally saw an opportunity. The babysitter became distracted by a phone call. She stepped into another room. Victor immediately began crawling. Fast. Faster than he had ever crawled before. Freedom was close. Very close. He reached the hallway. Success. Then the front door. Even greater success. Another few meters and he would be outside. His greatest escape attempt yet. Then a familiar golden retriever appeared. Max. The dog happily wagged his tail. Victor froze. No. Max barked loudly. Victor's eyes widened. No, no, no. The barking continued. A few seconds later, the babysitter returned. There you are. Victor wanted to scream. His own henchman had betrayed him. Max looked proud of himself. Victor mentally fired him on the spot. That evening Emma returned home. The babysitter laughed while telling stories. He tried escaping 3 times. Emma smiled. 3 times. 3 times. Emma looked at Damien. Victor avoided eye contact. Daniel almost laughed. Almost. Later that night, Victor sat quietly beside Emma on the couch. For once, nobody was watching him. No babysitter. No Daniel. No interruptions. Emma gently held him while reading a book. The room was peaceful. Comfortable. Warm. Victor didn't understand why he liked it. He shouldn't. He was Victor Blackwell. A criminal mastermind. Yet somehow. Moments like this felt nice. Emma smiled and gently touched his hair. You know, Damien. Victor looked up. I wonder what kind of person you'll become. For some reason, her voice sounded different. Softer. Hopeful. Victor remained silent. Emma laughed. Hopefully less trouble than your father. Victor almost smiled. Almost. Days passed. Then weeks. The mysterious black car continued appearing. Daniel continued investigating. Lucas Reed continued searching. And Victor continued growing. Life settled into an uneasy routine. Until one afternoon. Everything changed. Emma decided to take Damien shopping. The weather was perfect. The city streets were crowded. Families walked together. Children laughed. Traffic moved normally. It seemed like an ordinary day. Nothing unusual. Nothing dangerous. Victor sat in his stroller while Emma pushed him along the sidewalk. He observed people carefully. Old habits never disappeared. Even now he automatically analyzed everyone around him. Potential threats. Potential opportunities. Potential problems. Then suddenly, a loud metallic crack echoed overhead. Victor looked up. Several people stopped walking. A construction site stood beside the road. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Workers began shouting. Panic spread instantly. Someone screamed. Look out! Victor's eyes widened. A massive section of metal scaffolding broke loose from above. It was falling. Directly toward them. Everything happened in seconds. People ran. Workers shouted. Cars stopped. Victor couldn't move. His tiny body froze. The falling structure grew larger. Closer. 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 Then Emma moved. Without hesitation. Without thinking. Without caring about herself. She threw herself over the stroller. Wrapping both arms around Damien. Protecting him completely. The impact came like an explosion. Metal crashed. Concrete shattered. Dust filled the air. The world disappeared. Several moments later, silence returned. Victor slowly opened his eyes. His vision was blurry. Dust covered everything. The stroller had been crushed. Twisted metal surrounded him. But he wasn't hurt. Not even a scratch. Because Emma had protected him. Victor tried moving. Then he saw her. His heart stopped. Emma was trapped beneath fallen debris. Blood covered part of her face. She wasn't moving. People began screaming nearby. Workers rushed forward. Someone called for an ambulance. Someone shouted for help. But Victor heard none of it. For the first time since his rebirth. For the first time since becoming Damien Hayes. Fear overwhelmed him. Real fear. Not for himself. For her. His mother. The woman who had thrown herself in front of danger without hesitation. The woman who had protected him. The woman who might now be dying. Victor stared at her motionless form. And for the first time in both of his lives, the former Shadow King broke down. Tears poured from his eyes. His cries echoed through the chaos. Louder. And louder. And louder. As rescue workers desperately tried to reach Emma beneath the rubble.